Hi there today. We're drifting back through the mists of time, not to a land of gallant knights and fairy tale castles, but to the damp, rugged, and often miserable reality of medieval Wales. Picture it now. No grand highways, just muddy tracks, winding through dense, wolf-haunted forests. The air thick, with the smell of wood smoke and rain, clings to your woolen cloak as you look out over a landscape of steep hills and deep valleys, a patchwork of green and gray under a perpetually overcast sky. This isn't the glorious romanticized past you see in movies. Frankly, you probably won't survive this. The odds are stacked against you from the moment you're born. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go on and post your location and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is listening from. Now dim, the lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are born into a world defined by the ground beneath your feet and the will of the man who owns it. There is no Wales in the way you might think of a nation today. There is no single king, no gleaming capital city, no unified government sending out neat little tax returns. Instead, the land is a fractured mosaic of rival territories, a collection of what historians call gwynedd or lordships. Your world is your contref, a block of land theoretically made up of 100 settlements, though that's more of an ideal than a firm headcount. Your loyalty, your identity, and your fate are all tied to your local lord, the Arglwydd. He is your protector, and your oppressor, your landlord, and your judge. His hall, likely a sturdy timber structure perched on a defensible hill, is the center of your universe. It is from there that law, such as it is, trickles down. It is to him that you owe your allegiance, your labor, and a hefty portion of everything you produce. You live under the heavy thumb of his authority, a pressure as constant and inescapable as the damp Welsh air. This isn't a distant abstract rule. You see him, or at least his thuggish representatives, regularly. You know the sound of their horses' hooves on the track. You know the look of the reeve who comes to assess your grain tribute, his eyes lingering a little too long on your best pig. There's no anonymous bureaucracy here. This is personal. Your life unfolds in the shadow of this power. You wake with the sun, not because of some deep spiritual connection to nature, but because you can't afford to burn precious tallow for candles. The first thing you feel is the chill. It seeps up from the packed earth floor of your hut, a persistent dampness that settles deep in your bones. The air is smoky from the central hearth, a sting in your eyes that you've long since grown used to. Your world is small. The farthest you might travel in your entire life is to the next valley, perhaps, for a market or a religious festival. The concepts of Gwynedd in the north or Deheubarth in the south are as foreign to you as the lands of the Saracens you hear about in garbled tales. Those are the domains of other lords, other kings, or brenhinoed as they're called. A mainstream historical fact for you is that Wales was carved up into these major kingdoms, but that lofty political reality means little to your daily grind. Your Brennan is your lord, the most powerful man in your immediate vicinity, and his power is absolute only until a more ambitious neighbor decides to challenge it. This brings us to the core of your precarious existence instability. The lords are always squabbling. Alliances are made over casks of ale and broken by morning. A border is not a neat line on a map, but a shifting contested zone where cattle are rustled and barns are burned. You live with a low-level simmering anxiety. You listen to the sounds of the night, not for poetic inspiration, but for the telltale signs of a raiding party. Is that just the wind howling through the trees, or is it the war cry of men from the next lordship overcome to prove a point? It's a bit like living in a neighborhood where the homeowners association settles disputes with flaming arrows. Historians still argue whether the Welsh sense of a single national identity was stronger than their fierce local loyalties during this period. Did you see yourself as Welsh first, or as a man of Powys bound to the Lord of Mathrafel? For you, the answer is simple. It's a matter of survival. You cling to the familiar, to your family, your village, your lord. He might be a tyrant, but he's your tyrant. His strength, his cunning, his ability to command his household guard, his Tulu, is what stands between your family and starvation, or worse. This fierce localized identity is everything. It's a quirky tidbit of the time that a man's status and legal standing, his very worth, was tied directly to his lineage and his place within that local lordship. Without that connection, you were an outsider with no rights and no protection. You were in a very real sense a nobody. So, you keep your head down, you pay your dues, and you pray that your Lord is stronger and smarter than the Lord in the next valley. You pray that he's good at fighting, or at least smart enough to avoid picking fights he can't win. Your life depends on it more than you could possibly imagine. The mist over the hills looks beautiful from a distance, but for you, it's just something that makes the world cold, wet, and full of uncertainty. That constant gnawing uncertainty is the landscape of your mind, but your physical world is even more constrained. It is defined by the walls of your own home, a structure you likely had to build with your own hands. You don't just browse for properties on Zillow. When it's time for you to have a family of your own, you must find a piece of unused land scrub marsh or wooded slope that your Lord will grant you permission to use. It's not a gift. It's a lease paid for with service and a share of whatever you can scratch from the soil. Once you have the site, you and your kinsmen get to work. You're building what's called a longhouse, a single long rectangular building that will house you, your family, and crucially, your livestock. And you might have to build it fast. Here we stumble upon a curious and persistent piece of Welsh tradition, the Tai Unnos, or one-night house. This is the quirky tidbit of your age, the belief that if a person could, with the help of friends and family, build a house on common land in a single night, walls up, roof on, and smoke curling from the chimney by dawn, then they could claim freehold ownership of the property. To sweeten the deal, you could then supposedly claim all the land. Within the distance, you could throw an axe from your new front door. It's a wonderfully romantic image, a sort of medieval land grab meets an extreme home makeover show. But it does make you wonder about the athletic prowess required for home ownership back then. A strong throwing arm could be the difference between a garden and a small farm. Whether or not the Tai Unnos was a legally binding custom is a matter of debate. Historians still argue about how strictly this tradition was followed, or if it was more of a romanticized folk memory than a widespread legal practice. For you, the reality is less about legal loopholes and more about practical necessity. You need shelter, and you need it now. The most common method involves creating a series of A-shaped wooden frames known as crucks. You find two tall, sturdy timbers, preferably with a natural curve, and join them at the peak to form an arch. Several of these cruck frames, set in a line and joined by a ridgepole, form the skeleton of your new home. There's a raw, earthy genius to it, using the natural shapes of the trees to create a strong, vaulted interior. The walls are not solid stone or timber. You don't have that kind of wealth. Instead, you weave a lattice of flexible hazel or willow branches between the upright posts, a technique called wattle. The result is a sort of rigid, basket-like wall. Then comes the daub. This is the messy part. You mix together what you have: wet clay, sticky soil, chopped straw, and for extra binding and thermal insulation, animal dung. You slap this pungent, muddy plaster all over the wattle, pushing it into every crack and crevice, both inside and out. It's cold, smelly work, and your hands will be chapped and raw for days. But once it dries, it creates a reasonably weatherproof barrier against the wind and rain. For the roof, you lay a thick coat of thatch, perhaps reeds from a nearby marsh, or straw left over from the grain harvest. It's a good insulator, keeping the house warmer in winter and cooler in summer, but it's also a constant maintenance project. It leaks, it rots, and it becomes a five-star hotel for mice, rats, spiders, and anything else that fancies a dry place to live. You often lie awake at night listening to the rustles and skittering sounds from directly above your head, a gentle reminder that you are never truly alone. Step inside. The first thing that hits you is the smoke. There is no chimney, as you would imagine it, just a hole in the roof above the central hearth. The fire, a permanent fixture in the middle of the floor, is the heart of the home. It's where you cook the source of all warmth and the only light after the sun goes down. But its smoke fills the upper half of the room in a thick, stinging haze. Your eyes water constantly. Soot blackens the timbers of the roof and coats every surface with a greasy film. You develop a persistent cough, the soot cough, that will likely be your companion for life. The floor is simply the earth packed down by the constant tread of feet, human and animal. It's cold, perpetually damp, and impossible to truly clean. Spills are just stamped back into the dirt. The layout is simple and communal. This single long room is divided into two parts, a mainstream historical fact of these structures. At one end, the penúshaf, or upper end, is the human living space. Here you have the hearth and perhaps a rough-hewn bench or two. You sleep on raised platforms covered with straw-filled mattresses or piles of fragrant heather. Privacy is an unimaginable luxury. You sleep, eat, and live within earshot of everyone in your family. The other end, the penaisaf, or lower end, is for your most valuable possessions, your animals. A couple of cows, maybe a few sheep or pigs live inside with you, especially during the cold winter months. They are separated from your living space by a simple screen or a low partition. It's a practical arrangement. Their body heat helps to warm the entire building, and having them indoors protects them from wolves and rustlers. The downside, of course, is the noise and the smell. You fall asleep to the sound of a cow chewing its cud and wake up to the stench of a manure pile that is literally inside your house. Personal space hasn't been invented yet, or if it has, nobody sent you the memo. You live in a crowd, a noisy, smoky, smelly living building, a world away from the quiet solitude you might seek for sleep. This isn't just a house. It's a shared survival pod, thatched and daubed against the harsh Welsh elements. The smoky air of your longhouse is a constant, but the smell that truly rules your life is the smell of what's cooking, or more often, what isn't. Your entire existence, from the moment you wake in the pre-dawn chill to the moment you huddle for warmth at night, is dictated by the quest for calories. Survival is a relentless calculation of energy spent versus energy consumed, and you are perpetually running a deficit. Your diet isn't about pleasure choice or culinary artistry. It's about staving off the gnawing emptiness in your belly for one more day. The menu is short, brutally repetitive, and revolves around one humble, versatile, and frankly boring ingredient: oats. Oats are the bedrock of your diet. You eat them boiled into a thick, gloopy porridge called limru, or sawans, a sour fermented concoction that bubbles away over the hearth for hours. The sour tang is a feature, not a bug, a result of soaking the husks in water for days, a process which helps to preserve it. You eat it for your first meal of the day, and often for your last. It's bland, it's gray, but it's filling. When not boiled oats are ground into a coarse flour and mixed with water to be slapped onto a hot griddle stone, creating thin, hard oat cakes. These are your bread, your crackers, your utensils. You use them to scoop up the limru, or whatever else is in the communal cooking pot. It's a bit like having a plate you can eat, which is handy because you probably don't own many actual plates. Alongside oats, the other great pillar of your sustenance comes not from the soil, but from your live-in housemates, the cattle. A mainstream historical fact of the era is that Welsh society was far more pastoral than that of their English neighbors. Wealth wasn't measured in acres of wheat fields, but in the number of cows you owned. Cattle were everything. They were currency, a status symbol, and a walking larder. You bleed them periodically, mixing the blood with oatmeal to make a protein-rich pudding, a sort of medieval black pudding. But their true value lies in their milk. From that milk comes a cascade of essential foods. There's in butter and cause cheese, vital sources of fat and protein that can be preserved. Your summer is a flurry of churning and pressing, creating hard, salty cheeses that will, with any luck, see you through the lean winter months. The whey and buttermilk left over from the process are drunk sour and thin, but too valuable in calories to be discarded. So, your daily fare is a rotation of oat porridge, oat cakes, and dairy. But what about a bit of variety? You might get lucky with a small walled vegetable patch, a garth, near your longhouse where you can grow a few hardy staples. Here, you'll find leeks, which would centuries later become a national symbol, cabbages, and perhaps some onions. The potato, of course, is a world away, slumbering in the Andes for another few centuries. Your most common root vegetable is the humble turnip or parsnip, and finding a particularly big one is cause for what passes as wild celebration. It's a sad state of affairs when a lumpy pale vegetable is the highlight of your week. But here we are. Meat is the great object of desire, the food of feasts and fantasies. The epic poems sung by bards are full of heroes feasting on roasted pork and sides of beef. But for you, meat is a rare luxury. You might get a taste of it at a festival hosted by your lord. Or if an animal in your own small herd becomes too old or sick to be of any other use. You'll eat every part of it, from the tongue to the tail, boiling the bones for days to extract every last drop of nourishment. Historians still argue whether the meaty banquets described in the great Welsh tales were purely an aristocratic privilege, or if the common person had more regular access to pork and beef than the sparse archaeological evidence suggests. Given the constant risk of hunger, it's hard to imagine you'd slaughter a valuable milk cow or a breeding sow unless you were truly desperate. You're more likely to get your protein from small-scale sources, a chicken that lays the occasional precious egg, or a trap set for a rabbit in the woods, hoping the Lord's foresters don't catch you poaching. This is where we find a quirky tidbit of your diet. If you live near the coast, you supplement your meager meals with a harvest from the sea. You gather shellfish from the rocks at low tide, but you also eat something that might seem strange to modern palates: seaweed. You gather a purplish, silky seaweed called laver, which you cook for hours until it becomes a dark green, gelatinous paste. It's incredibly nutritious, packed with vitamins and minerals that your inland cousins sorely lack. Mixed with oatmeal and fried on a griddle, these laver bread cakes are a briny, savory treat that provides a welcome jolt of flavor. And what do you wash all this down with? Water from the local stream is always an option, though a risky one that could lead to sickness. The far safer and more popular drink is tiburabu, or ale. It's not the light fizzy lager of today, but a thick, soupy, and nutritious brew made from fermented grain. It's unfiltered, full of sediment, and often called liquid bread for good reason. Everyone drinks it, including the children, as it's a vital source of calories and generally safer than the water. For a special occasion, if your Lord is feeling generous or a harvest has been particularly good, you might get to taste med or mead. This legendary honey wine, sweet and potent, is the stuff of songs. But for you, it's a once-a-year treat at best. Your daily reality is the sour ale and even sourer porridge. You exist in a state of near-permanent hunger, a dull ache that sharpens into a painful cramp during the long, dark winters when the cheese runs out and the grain stores are low. Your world is a simple, brutal equation of oats and effort. Your world of sour porridge and smoky air isn't a complete free-for-all. You may live under the thumb of a powerful lord, but even he is supposedly bound by a set of rules. This isn't a land of anarchy. It's a land of ancient, bewilderingly complex law. You live under Cyfraith Hywel, the law of Hywel, named after the 10th century king Hywel Dee, or Hywel the Good, who is famously credited with codifying the diverse legal traditions of Wales into a single system. This is the great mainstream historical fact of your legal world, that a wise king long ago brought order to the chaos. But there's no leather-bound volume of statutes in your wattle and daub hut. You can't read, and even if you could, the law isn't a fixed text. It's a living tradition, a vast body of precedent and custom held in the minds of professional jurists, the gwynedd men, who have spent a lifetime memorizing its intricate details. The core principle of this law is not about guilt and innocence in the way you might think. It's about maintaining balance. Every action has a price. The law is a huge, elaborate price list for every imaginable transgression, from stealing a pig to insulting your neighbor's wife to murder. It's all about compensation. If someone harms you, your family doesn't necessarily seek vengeance in blood. They seek payment in cattle or silver. This system is designed to prevent endless blood feuds from tearing the fragile fabric of society apart. Every person from the Lord, down to a humble farmer like you, has a specific monetary value, a life price called a gallinus. If you are killed, your killer owes your family your exact galanas. Likewise, every insult or injury has its price of payment called sarhad. And this is where the law gets wonderfully, weirdly specific, a true quirky tidbit of the age. The law books read like a butcher's chart combined with an insurance policy. A hand is worth a third of your total life price. A thumb with its nail is worth a third of the value of your hand, making it one of your most valuable digits. Losing a thumb, was not only inconvenient for your spear-holding abilities, but also a significant financial setback. An eye, a foot, a nose, they all have a price. Even your teeth are valued individually, with the front teeth being worth more than the molars, presumably, because they affect your appearance more. It creates a strange transactional view of the human body. You don't just have a body, you have a collection of assets with clearly defined market values. When a dispute arises, a stolen cow, a disputed land boundary, an accusation of injury, you don't go to a modern courthouse with a bewigged judge. The process is both more personal and more public. The case is heard at the local court, the LLIs, which might just be an open field where your lord sits on a ceremonial chair. There is no CSI Ceredigion. Evidence is not about forensics. It's about oaths. Your greatest asset in court is your reputation and the number of people willing to swear for you. You will need to gather Reithweir, or oath helpers, typically men from your extended family, who will come and swear on holy relics, not that you are innocent, but that your own oath is trustworthy. It's a popularity contest with dire consequences. If the other person can muster more or higher status oath helpers, you are likely to lose regardless of the facts. This is where things get tricky. Historians still argue about whether the beautifully detailed law manuscripts that have survived truly represent the law as it was practiced for everyone, or if they were more of an academic idealized version, compiled by and for the legal elite. Did a dispute between two poor farmers like you really involve a precise calculation of the value of a forefinger? Or was it more likely a shouting match settled by the Lord's reeve with a swift kick? The law books describe a system of almost scientific precision, but your reality is likely much messier, depending heavily on the mood of the Lord and your social standing. Let's not forget that while the law is obsessed with compensation, it also has a brutal punitive side. If you're an outsider with no kin to pay your fines or swear for you, you're in serious trouble. For a serious crime like secret theft, where you are caught with the goods, the punishment is swift and final. There is no prison system. It's too expensive. You will likely be executed or sold into slavery. That gnawing hunger you feel every day becomes even more terrifying when you know that stealing a loaf of bread to feed your family could result in your death. It's a powerful deterrent. Trying to understand your legal rights and obligations is like trying to assemble flat-pack furniture in the dark without instructions, except if you get it wrong, you don't just have a wobbly table. You might owe your neighbor 3 cows and an apology, or find yourself on the end of a rope. So, you walk a fine line. You try to live peaceably. You rely on your kin, your simdithus, to have your back. The law of Hywel is less a shield protecting you and more a complex web you have to navigate with extreme care. It quantifies your worth, your honor, and your very limbs in cold hard currency, a constant reminder of your place in the rigid hierarchy of this damp green and legally fascinating land. That intricate legal web, with its specific prices for thumbs and teeth, is designed to keep your society from tearing itself apart. It works for internal disputes, for when your neighbor's pig wanders into your vegetable patch or a drunken brawl at a wedding goes a bit too far. But it offers you absolutely no protection when the violence isn't a local squabble, but an organized assault. You live with the constant humming fear of the raid, an event that brushes aside all laws of compensation and replaces them with the simple, brutal law of the sword. The peace is fragile, and you know it. Every night, As the fire in your longhouse dies down to embers, you lie in the smoky darkness and you listen. You listen past the gentle rustling of the thatch and the soft chewing of the cow at the other end of the room. You're listening for the sounds that don't belong. The frantic distant barking of dogs, a panicked lowing of cattle, or the faintest flicker of an unnatural orange glow against the clouds, a sign that a farmstead on the far side of the valley is already burning. The raids come in two terrifying flavors. The first and most common is the raid from a rival Welsh lordship. This is a time-honored, almost seasonal feature of your existence. Your lord has insulted a neighboring Argylwyd, or perhaps a long-standing feud over a piece of land has boiled over once again. So the other lord gathers his Tuulu, his household warriors, and a band of followers, and they sweep into your territory. A mainstream historical fact is that this type of cattle raiding, known as an anaraith, was a central part of the Welsh political and economic system. It wasn't seen as mere banditry. It was a legitimate act of war, and a way for a young warrior to prove his mettle and gain wealth. It was, in essence, how ambitious men got ahead. It's a bit like a hostile corporate takeover, but instead of lawyers and stock options, the tools are spears and torches. For the raiders, it's a daring adventure. For you, it is sheer terror. Their goal is not to occupy the land or kill everyone. Their goal is to steal your wealth. And in Wales, wealth is on the hoof. They want your cattle, your sheep, your pigs. They want the grain you've painstakingly harvested and stored for the winter. They will take anything of value, and to add insult to injury, they will burn what they cannot carry. You'll be woken by screams and the terrifying blast of a war horn. Chaos erupts. Your only instinct is to survive. You scramble to push your children out of the hut and into the darkness of the nearby woods, praying they can stay hidden and quiet. You might make a futile attempt to drive your precious cow into the trees before the raiders find her. There is no fighting back. You are a farmer with at best a wood axe or a sharpened stick. They are warriors, hard men, who live for this, armed with shield spears and swords. To resist is to die. And here's the quirky and rather galling tidbit about it all. The very men who lead these raids are often celebrated as heroes. A successful raid that brings back a great herd of cattle from a rival's territory is a cause for celebration. The bards, the esteemed poets of your society, will compose grand, stirring poems in praise of the raid's leader, lauding his courage, his ferocity, and the riches he has won. So you might be huddling in the rain, homeless and hungry, while somewhere in the next valley, the man responsible for your misery is being toasted as a champion, his praises sung in rhyming couplets. It's a tough pill to swallow. The second type of raid is worse. It comes from the east, from the borderlands known as the Marches. Here, the Anglo-Norman lords, the Marcher lords, are a constant encroaching threat. When they raid, it feels different. It is colder, more systematic, and carries the chilling promise of permanence. They are not just here for your cows. They are here for the land itself. Their armored knights on huge war horses are a vision of metallic death, an unstoppable force against which you have no defense. Their violence is less about proving a point and more about clearing a path. These raids are the sharp end of a slow-motion invasion that has been grinding away at the edges of Wales for generations. Historians still debate the precise economic impact of this constant low-level raiding versus the larger-scale destruction of formal warfare. But for you and your family huddled in the woods, watching your home burn, that distinction is utterly meaningless. The immediate aftermath is what matters. You creep back at dawn, not to the familiar smell of wood smoke from your hearth, but to the acrid stench of a smoldering ruin. The wattle and daub walls are blackened and collapsed. The thatch roof is gone. The carefully prepared food stores for winter are either stolen or spoiled. Your animals, the key to your survival, are gone. You are left with nothing but the clothes on your back and the terrifying knowledge that winter is coming. You have survived the raid, but you now face its silent creeping accomplice, starvation. The violence of the night is over, but the brutal struggle for the next few months has just begun. You have survived the terror of the raid, but as you huddle in the ruins of your home or crowd into a neighbor's already cramped longhouse, a new, quieter enemy begins its assault. This enemy doesn't carry a spear or a torch. It rides on the damp air, it lurks in the stream water, and it breeds in the gut-wrenching hunger that now defines your days. Sickness is the silent partner to violence and poverty, the ghost that haunts every family. Your body already weakened by a monotonous diet of oats and a chronic lack of vitamins has a fragile defense system. The relentless physical labor, the bone-deep chill of the Welsh winters, and the smoky air you breathe have worn you down. You are a prime target for every ailment imaginable. A simple cut, a scratch from a thorn while gathering firewood, is not a minor inconvenience. It's a potential death sentence. You have no antibacterial ointment, no sterile bandages. You might wash the wound in the same stream where animals drink and relieve themselves, and then pack it with moss or spider webs, hoping for the best. Within days, the telltale signs of infection can appear. The angry red, swelling the heat, the throbbing pain, and the terrifying red lines that creep up your limb a sign that the poison is spreading. There is little anyone can do but watch and pray. Breathing itself is a hazard. Remember that smoky soot that coats the inside of your home. It also coats the inside of your lungs. A deep hacking cough is a constant companion for almost everyone, a rhythmic bass note in the symphony of daily life. It worsens in winter, developing into what you call the chest sickness, what a modern doctor might diagnose as bronchitis or pneumonia. You fight for every rasping breath, your fevered body shivering uncontrollably, even as you huddle by the fire. Then there are the fevers that come from nowhere, the plagues that can sweep through a community and leave half the children gone. And there is the dreaded bloody flux, a brutal form of dysentery that leaves you weak and dehydrated, a miserable and undignified way to fade from the world. Your knowledge of hygiene is rudimentary at best. You understand that filth is unpleasant, but you don't grasp the invisible world of germs that connects the dung heap at one end of your house with the sickness in your stomach. So, what do? When illness strikes, you don't call a doctor. Instead, you turn to the collective wisdom of your community, a complex brew of practical herbalism and deep-seated superstition. The first line of defense is a mainstream historical fact of the era, the incredible knowledge of medicinal plants. This is the domain of the local healer, often an older woman who knows the secrets of the hills and forests, or perhaps a practitioner from a lineage like the famous physicians of Midfi, a legendary family of healers said to have been gifted their knowledge by a lady from a mystical lake. They know that the leaves of the comfrey plant, when mashed into a poultice, can help to set a broken bone, earning it the name knit bone. They know to give you willow bark to chew on for your fever and aches unknowingly providing you with salicin nature's aspirin. A wound might be packed with yarrow to staunch the bleeding, while a foul-smelling brew of potent herbs is forced down your throat to purge the sickness from your gut. This brings us to a truly quirky tidbit of medieval medicine, the doctrine of signatures. This was a widespread belief that the Creator had helpfully marked plants to indicate what they could cure. A plant with a heart-shaped leaf must be good for the heart. The spotted leaves of lungwort resembled diseased lungs, so it was obviously the go-to remedy for your hacking cough. Walnuts look like little brains, so they must be good for ailments of the head. It's a beautifully simple and utterly mad system of logic. It makes you wonder what a plant that looked like your grumpy neighbor might be good for. Curing a bad mood, perhaps, but your treatment is rarely just physical. Sickness isn't simply a matter of the body, it's a spiritual battle. A persistent illness might be blamed on the evil eye, a curse from a jealous neighbor, or the mischief of the Tylwyth Teg, the fairy folk, who might steal your health away. So the healer's work is twofold. While they apply a poultice with one hand, they may be making magical charms with the other. They whisper ancient incantations over your body to drive out the malevolent spirits. Protective amulets made of rowan wood or iron are placed around your neck. You might be told to visit a sacred well, a place where the old pagan magic and the new Christian faith have blended together, and leave an offering in the hope that its holy water will wash away your ailment. Historians still argue about how this fusion of medicine and magic was perceived by the authorities and the church. Was your local healer a respected physician, or was she walking a dangerous line, always one accusation away from being branded a witch? The reality for you is that you don't care about the theology of it. You just want the pain to stop. You accept the herbal brew and the whispered charm with equal hope. You are hedging your bets. If the willow bark doesn't bring the fever down, maybe the incantation will. This blending of the practical and the magical defines your entire experience of health. When the healer comes, they might ask to inspect your urine, judging its color and smell, to diagnose your inner imbalance. It's a desperate attempt to find answers in a world where so much is unknown and so much is beyond your control. You place your faith in these remedies, in these rituals, because they are all you have. They are the only weapons you possess against the invisible enemies that are far more likely to carry you away than any raiding party. The fear that settles in your bones when sickness strikes is a cold and lonely one, but you are rarely physically alone in your suffering. A family member forces the bitter herbal brew past your lips, a neighbor holds a cool, damp cloth to your head, and your kin gather in the smoky confines of your home, their presence a small human shield against the great, terrifying dark. That collective presence is the most powerful medicine you have. In a world defined by hardship, your survival depends less on your own strength and more on the strength of the bonds that tie you to others. You are not an individual in the modern sense. You are a single thread woven into a thick, complex, and vital tapestry called Simdithas. This is your community, your society, the web of relationships that holds you and gives your life meaning. At the very heart of your Simdithas is your Sendel, your kindred. This is your extended family, a clan that traces its lineage back to a common great-grandfather. These people are your everything. They are your social safety net, your legal defense team, and your business partners. Your identity is inseparable from theirs. When you meet a stranger, you don't introduce yourself with your job or your hobbies. You recite your lineage, I am Llewellyn ap Dafydd ap Iwan, tracing your place in the great family tree. Your worth, both personal and legal, is a direct reflection of your standing within this kin group. A mainstream historical fact is that this organization around the synodal was the fundamental building block of Welsh society, dictating everything from land inheritance to legal responsibility. Remember the laws of Hywel Dda from before with their detailed prices for every body part. That system only makes sense in the context of the senatal. If you are wronged and are owed a payment of sarhad, that payment is shared among your kin. More importantly, if you commit a crime and owe a hefty fine, or even the full Galanus payment for killing someone, you don't pay it alone. The debt is shared across your entire kindred, with closer relatives paying a larger share. This is a system of absolute collective responsibility. It's like being financially responsible for every stupid thing your idiot third cousin decides to do after drinking too much ale. It ensures that the entire family takes a very keen interest in the behavior of its members, because one person's hot-headed mistake can bankrupt everyone. This interconnectedness shapes every aspect of your daily grind. You likely don't own your own plot of land in the way a modern farmer would. Instead, you hold strips of land in a large open field that is farmed communally. You probably don't own a full team of 8 oxen required to pull the heavy plow through the wet soil. So you engage in C-tier a co-plowing partnership with your neighbors, most of whom are also your relatives. You pool your animals, your labor, and your resources, all working together to turn the soil that will feed you all. When it's time to build a new longhouse, as we saw, it's the seneddle that shows up to raise the cruck timbers and slap the daub on the walls. When a raiding party is spotted, the warning cry goes out, not just to save one family, but to save the entire settlement, the treff. Within this system is a quirky and fascinating custom that underscores the importance of these bonds, fosterage or siphisteer. It was common practice for you to send your child at around the age of 7 to be raised in the household of a kinsman, very often a maternal uncle. This wasn't seen as strange or uncaring. On the contrary, it was a vital social institution. Fosterage built powerful alliances between families. It gave your child a second set of parents and a wider network of support and loyalty that would last a lifetime. A foster brother was as close as a blood brother. The foster parents had strict legal duties to care for the child, to educate them in the skills they would need for life. For a boy, farming and fighting. For a girl, running a household. It was a formal binding relationship that strengthened the entire fabric of the Shimdithas. Of course, this tight-knit world wasn't always harmonious. Historians still argue about whether this rigid kin-based structure was ultimately a source of stability or a cause of constant friction. On the one hand, it provided an incredible support system. On the other, the fierce loyalty to one's own senatal could easily escalate small disputes into violent multi-generational feuds between clans. Your family's honor was your honor, and an insult to a distant cousin could demand a response from you. It meant your world was full of inherited friends, and more dangerously, inherited enemies. There's a clear downside to this all-encompassing embrace. There is no privacy and very little individuality. Your life's path is largely determined by your birth and your family's needs. And if you were to commit a crime so heinous that your own senatal disowned you, you would become an outcast and altered. To be kinless in medieval Wales was to be socially and legally dead. You had no one to pay your fines, no one to act as your oath helper, no one to stand for you. You were a non-person, adrift and vulnerable, a fate many would consider worse than death. The embrace of the seneddle could feel suffocating, but to be pushed out of it was to be cast into a terrifying void. So you cherish these bonds. They are your anchor in a brutal and unpredictable world. The laughter of your cousins by the fire, the shared work in the fields, the knowledge that dozens of people are bound by blood and law to have your back. This is what makes survival possible. Your kindred, your sea needle, provides a human fortress against the harshness of the world. They are your allies in a land dispute, your co-laborers in the field, and your support in times of sickness. But there are fears that even the strongest kin group cannot protect you from. They cannot shield you from the sudden, inexplicable sickness that carries off a healthy child, the strange blight that withers your crops in the field, or the unsettling noises you hear from the ancient burial mound on the hill. For these things, you have a different framework of understanding. Your world is not neatly divided into the natural and the supernatural. The two are deeply, inextricably intertwined. The landscape you inhabit is alive, humming with an ancient power that is neither good nor evil, but dangerously potent. This is a world steeped in superstition, where every stream, ancient tree, and misty hilltop has a story and a spirit. This belief in an enchanted world is a mainstream historical fact of your time. It's not a childish fantasy, but a core part of your worldview. The veil between your world and the other world and NWN is thin, and sometimes things cross over. The primary inhabitants of this other realm are the Tylwyth Teg, the fair folk. Forget any notion of tiny fluttering pixies. The Tylwyth Teg are powerful human-sized beings of breathtaking beauty and terrifying caprice. They can appear as luminous, aristocratic figures, dressed in shimmering green or white, their music so enchanting it can lure you away from your own life. To stumble upon a fairy dance is to risk everything. You might be drawn into their circle, thinking you have danced for a mere hour, only to break free and find that 100 years have passed in the mortal realm, leaving you a stranger in your own home, your family and friends long dead and buried. Because of this, you are careful. You learn the rules. You don't whistle near a fairy mound at night. You are wary of unnaturally green patches of grass, the so-called fairy rings, and you are especially protective of your children. A beautiful, healthy baby is a prime target for the Tylwyth Teg, who might steal the infant from its cradle and leave a plenty newid, a changeling, in its place. The changeling looks like the human baby, but is peevish, sickly, and has an unsettling wisdom in its eyes. Much of the folklore about how to expose a changeling is grim, often involving threatening it with heat or iron. It's a sad and terrifying way that your people try to explain a child's sudden illness or developmental problems. You develop a host of protective measures, folk magic, to ward off this unwanted attention. Cold iron is the ultimate fairy repellent. Its very touch is anathema to them. You might place a knife or a pair of tongs in your baby's cradle. You might carry a nail in your pocket as a personal amulet. The wood of the rowan tree, or mountain ash, is also a powerful shield against dark magic and malevolent spirits. You hang sprigs of it over the door to your longhouse and tie smaller pieces to your cows' tails to protect their precious milk from being cursed or stolen by supernatural means. You also learn that some spirits need to be appeased. The BW Bashad, a type of household spirit akin to a goblin, can be helpful, but if offended, it will cause chaos, souring the milk, tangling your weaving, and making things disappear. So you leave out a small bowl of fresh cream or a piece of good bread by the hearth at night, a little bribe to keep the peace. It's a bit like having invisible paranormal roommates who you have to constantly keep happy. Beyond the fair folk, your world is full of omens and portents. And this brings us to a truly quirky and chilling tidbit of Welsh superstition, the Canwyll Corph, or corpse candle. You might be walking home at dusk when you see a faint, eerie light floating through the air. It's not a lantern, it moves with a silent purpose. This light you believe is a corpse candle, and it foretells a death. It appears at the home of the person who is about to die and follows the exact path their funeral procession will take to the church. The color and size of the light indicate the age and sex of the doomed person, a small pale light; for a child, a large bright one; for a man in his prime. To see a corpse candle is a terrifying and infallible prophecy. Historians and folklorists still debate the origins of these deeply ingrained beliefs. Are they the last vestiges of pre-Christian Celtic religion, ancient gods and spirits demoted to the status of fairies and goblins? Or are they simply the natural psychological product of living in a harsh and uncertain world, a way to impose a narrative on random events, like sudden death or a patch of mist on a hill? For you, the debate is meaningless. The omens are real. A lone magpie is a sign of sorrow. A dog howling for no reason outside your hut is a terrible sign. You learn to read the world like a book of prophecies. It's not silly. It's a necessary survival skill. Blaming the Tylwyth Teg for a missing tool is in its own way more comforting than accepting the chaos of a world where things simply get lost. As if the threat of raids and starvation wasn't enough, you now have to worry about the existential dread brought on by a black and white bird. This supernatural layer is your reality shaping your decisions, your fears, and your daily rituals, a constant invisible presence in your brutal, beautiful, and haunted land. The supernatural fears that haunt your world are potent, but they are fears of the unseen, of the half-glimpsed light in the twilight woods. You can, for the most part, avoid them by following the old rules and respecting the ancient places. But there is another shadow creeping over your land, a shadow that is all too solid, a shadow cast by stone and iron and an implacable foreign ambition. This is the shadow of the Marcher Lords, the powerful predatory Anglo-Norman barons who have been granted royal license to seize Welsh land by force. They are a different breed from your squabbling Welsh arglwyddi. Their violence is not for a quick profit of cattle, it's for conquest. Their presence is a slow, grinding pressure, a constant reminder that your entire way of life is under threat. You feel this presence most keenly in the sheer brutal arrogance of their castles. For generations, your people built their fortifications out of earth and timber structures that blended with the landscape. The Normans build in stone. Their castles are not just defensive strongholds. They are instruments of intimidation, stark alien monuments to a new and terrifying power. A mainstream historical fact is the sheer density of castles in the Welsh Marches. It is one of the most heavily fortified regions in all of medieval Europe. From the monstrous bulk of Chepstow in the south to the formidable walls of Chirk and Denbigh in the north, these castles are stone fists clenched on the landscape. You watch one being built. Your lord might have been defeated, or perhaps he has cautiously submitted to a greater Norman power. Now your life is turned upside down. Norman engineers speaking a harsh French you cannot understand survey the best spot, often a high cliff overlooking a river, a place with clear lines of sight. Then the work begins, and it is you who must do it. You are conscripted into a labor force. Your days are no longer spent in the familiar rhythm of plowing your strips of land or tending your animals. Now, you spend them in a quarry swinging a heavy hammer to break stone or hauling massive rough-hewn blocks on a wooden sledge. The work is backbreaking and dangerous. The air is filled with the chip, chip, chip of masons' chisels and the bellowed commands of the Norman overseers. It's a bitter, humiliating task, forcing you to build the very fortress that will ensure your own subjugation. The first structure they build is often a motte and bailey. They raise a huge earthen mound, the motte, and top it with a wooden tower. At its base, they enclose a large courtyard, the bailey, with a deep ditch and a timber palisade. This can be done quickly, a rapid imposition of control. But soon the stone walls begin to rise thick and impossibly high. You see the towers climb square and grim with narrow slits for archers' eyes that seem to watch your every move. The castle grows, like a stone cancer on the land, a permanent and unmovable statement of who is now in charge. And this brings us to a quirky and profoundly symbolic aspect of this new reality, the borough. The Marcher lords don't just build a castle, they build a town right outside its walls. These planned settlements, or boroughs, are populated not by your fellow Welshmen, but by English and Flemish colonists, merchants, artisans, and farmers, drawn by the promise of cheap land and the Lord's protection. You are excluded. The borough becomes a little pocket of England, a foreign entity with its own market, its own church, and its own laws. You might go there to sell a few eggs or a hide, but you are an outsider, viewed with suspicion. You hear the sounds of a different language, see different styles of dress. The castle looms over the town, and the town itself feels like another wall, a social and economic barrier separating you from the new center of power. It's a system of apartheid in all but name. This transformation of the landscape and society is devastating. Historians still argue about the primary motivation of the Marcher lords. Were they driven mainly by a strategic state-level desire to secure the border of England, acting as agents of the English crown? Or were they essentially ambitious entrepreneurial freelances driven by personal greed and a lust for power, carving out private kingdoms for themselves with little regard for royal strategy? For you, their motives are irrelevant. The result is the same. The land your senetal has farmed for generations is now under the control of a Norman lord. The tribute you once paid to your Welsh arglwydd, the food renders the service, is now owed to a foreigner who likely despises you and your culture. The oppression is not always violent, but it is constant. You live with new laws, new taxes, and a new harsh forest law that makes it a crime to hunt for game or even gather firewood in what was once your communal woodland. The castle changes everything. It changes the way you move, forcing you to take longer routes around the Lord's domain. It changes the economy, funneling trade and wealth into the new borough. And most of all, it changes your sense of place. The ancient hills once home to the Tylwyth Teg and the spirits of your ancestors now bear this gray stone scar. The shadow of the keep falls across your fields every afternoon, a daily reminder of your loss, a chilling portent of a future that looks less and less Welsh every day. The stone shadow of the Marcher lord's castle is a constant suffocating weight on your spirit. That oppression coupled with the endless feuds between the remaining Welsh lords, means that the fragile peace is always temporary. Your life is a short lull between conflicts, and you know that sooner or later the call will come. You will be forced to trade your wood axe for a weapon of war. It happens suddenly. The Lord's Reeve, accompanied by a few hard-faced members of the Tulu, rides into your settlement. There is no negotiation, no polite letter of conscription. You are a tenant on the Lord's land, and your rent includes military service. You are obligated to fight for him, typically for a number of weeks each year. To refuse is unthinkable. It would mean being cast out, losing your land and your place in the Simdithus. So you take a long look at your family, grab what little you have, and fall in line. You are not a knight in shining armor. You are not even a professional soldier. You are a farmer, and you are equipped as such. Your primary defensive gear consists of your ordinary thick woolen tunic and a healthy dose of wishful thinking. If you are fortunate, you might have a padded tunic called a gambeson, or a tough leather jacket known as a luric, but proper metal armor is the sole preserve of the wealthy elite. You have no helmet. Your primary protection is the man standing next to you and a talent for ducking. Your weapon is not a finely balanced sword, but a spear. It is long, simple, and effective in the hands of a disciplined group. It's a versatile tool, good for poking at enemy spearmen, useful for roasting a rabbit over a campfire if you survive the day, and an excellent walking stick. A true multi-purpose implement of doom. Some of your neighbors, however, carry a far more fearsome weapon, one that has earned your people a deadly reputation. This is the Welsh longbow, a mainstream historical fact that sends a shiver down the spine of any armored Norman knight. Long before the English famously used it to win battles in France, the longbow was perfected in the valleys of Wales. Made from a single stave of yew, it is taller than a man and immensely powerful. It takes incredible strength developed over a lifetime of practice to draw it fully. In the hands of a skilled archer, it can shoot an arrow, the saith, with terrifying force and accuracy. The chronicler, Gerald of Wales, a man who was part Norman and part Welsh, wrote in awe of its power, describing arrows that could pin a knight's armored thigh to his wooden saddle and even go straight through his horse. To face a volley from a company of Welsh archers was to face a storm of razor-tipped death. So you march. You join a growing host of men just like you, farmers, herders, and craftsmen, all torn from their homes. But you are not marched onto a great open field to fight a glorious pitched battle. Your lords are not that foolish. To line up unarmored spearmen against a charge of Norman heavy cavalry would be suicide. Welsh warfare is a different art form. It's a war of ambush, of lightning raids, of using your home turf as your greatest weapon. It is less Braveheart and more hide-and-seek with deadly consequences. You melt into the dense forests and misty mountains that you know so well. You use ancient tracks that are not on any Norman map. You harry their supply lines, you attack their foraging parties, and you disappear back into the wilderness before they can mount a proper response. This brings us to a quirky and terrifying tidbit of your military tactics, psychological warfare. Before launching an ambush from the dark woods, your army will create a hellish din. Men will shout and scream. War horns will blast their discordant notes from all directions, and you will all bang your spears against your simple wooden shields. To the disciplined but nervous Norman soldiers, marching in a tight column through a gloomy Welsh valley, the effect is terrifying. The sound seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, at once shattering their nerve, making them imagine they are surrounded by a force 10 times its actual size. It's a tactic designed to cause panic and confusion just before the real attack begins. Then chaos. The arrows fly a silent hiss, followed by choked screams. Your company of spearmen bursts from the tree line, charging down a slope to slam into the side of the disordered enemy column. The moments that follow are not a choreographed dance of flashing blades. They are a brutal, clumsy, and horrifying scrum. It's a pushing match with sharpened sticks, a desperate grunting affair in the mud and rain. You jab your spear at the figure in front of you. You try to keep your footing. You hear the wet splinter of wood and the awful sound of metal on bone. It is confusing, deafening, and over in minutes. You either succeed in breaking their formation and causing a rout, or you are repulsed, and you run for your life back to the safety of the trees. Military historians still debate the true strategic impact of the Welsh longbow in this period. Was its legendary power a decisive war-winning factor, or was it more of a brutally effective tool for harassment and attrition, with the real Welsh advantage lying in their guerrilla tactics and mastery of the difficult terrain? For you, in the heat of the moment, the debate is academic. You are just glad the archers are on your side. If you are lucky enough to survive the fight and the sickness that inevitably follows any military campaign, you are simply dismissed. There is no parade, no veteran's pension. You walk home, possibly wounded, certainly haunted to a farm that has been neglected in your absence. Your lord has made his point, or suffered his defeat. You have just survived, and you know with a grim certainty that you will be called to do it all over again. You watch the men march off to war, their spears glinting in the weak sunlight, and feel a familiar mix of fear for their safety and the grim resignation of knowing what their absence means for you. Because while the men are called upon for the sharp, terrifying bursts of violence, your life is a different kind of battle. It is a war fought on a different front, a relentless lifelong campaign of labor and endurance waged within the smoky confines of the longhouse and the small patch of land around it. As a woman, your world is both critically important and deeply constrained, a life of immense responsibility without the commensurate authority. Your work is the slow, grinding engine that keeps your world from collapsing. Your day begins long before the sun's first rays touch the misty hilltops. You are the one who rises first, in the cold, dark hut, your bare feet meeting the packed, dung-flecked earth. It is your job to coax the embers of the central hearth back to life, to fan them gently until you can add dried peat or wood, bringing warmth and the first light into the home. While the men and children stir, you are already at work. You grind the daily portion of oats on a heavy stone quern, a back-breaking circular motion that will make your shoulders and arms ache for a lifetime. You fetch the water from the stream, balancing heavy wooden buckets, your breath misting in the frigid air. You milk the cows there inside the longhouse, your head pressed against the animal's warm flank, its familiar earthy scent a small comfort. Then you prepare the first meal of the day, the same gray, sour oat porridge, the limru, that you will eat for the rest of your life. Your domain is the pen ushaf, the upper end of the house, but your responsibilities spill out into every corner of your existence. You tend the small vegetable garth, you look after the chickens, and you spend countless hours on the most vital of all female skills, turning raw wool into clothing. You shear the sheep Wash the greasy fleece in the cold stream card between two spiked paddles to align the fibers and then spin, spin, spin. With a simple drop spindle, a weighted stick that you expertly twirl and drop to twist the wool into yarn, you create the thread that will become your family's tunics, cloaks, and blankets. It is a near constant activity, something you do while walking, while watching children, while gossiping with neighbors. Your hands are never still. Then comes the weaving on a simple upright loom, a slow, methodical process of creating the rough, durable cloth that will protect your family from the damp Welsh weather. And in this world of defined roles, we find a truly significant, mainstream, historical fact about your life. The Welsh legal system, the same Cyfraith Hywel that valued your brother's thumb so highly, gives you, as a woman, a legal standing and a degree of protection that would be the envy of your sisters across much of the rest of Europe. Marriage is not a sacrament in which you are subsumed by your husband. It is a formal legal contract. When you marry, you bring property with you, your argafro, and your husband brings his the gober, and both are joined together. For the first 7 years of your marriage, if the union fails, you are entitled to walk away with your original property and a share of what has been gained since. This brings us to the quirky and wonderfully specific tidbit embedded in these laws. If you decide to leave your husband, or he leaves you, the law details precisely what you are entitled to take. It is a list that paints a vivid picture of a woman's essential possessions. You get your clothing, your jewelry, your weaving and spinning tools, and most importantly, all the bedding. Specifically, you get the bedclothes, the sheets, and the blankets from your side of the bed up to the central rail. And the list continues with a charming practicality. You are legally entitled to your cat, your needle, and thread, a spare pair of shoes, your baking griddle, and one of all the dishes. It's a medieval divorce settlement that feels less like a bitter legal fight and more like two roommates deciding who gets to keep the toaster and the Netflix password. Of course, the existence of these laws raises a question that historians still debate. Did this legal framework, which seems so remarkably progressive on paper, actually reflect the reality of daily life for an ordinary woman like you? Or was it an ideal, a set of principles discussed by learned jurists that had little bearing on the power dynamics within your smoky longhouse, where a husband's temper might be a more immediate law than any distant text? The law gives you the right to leave an unsatisfactory marriage, but the social pressure from your kin and the practical difficulty of starting over would have been immense. Your life is a paradox. You are legally recognized, but physically constrained. You oversee the food, the clothing, and the health of the household, yet major decisions are made by men. Your life is an endless cycle of creation, of food, of cloth of children, and it is in childbirth that you face your greatest peril. With no medical understanding beyond herbal remedies and whispered prayers, bringing a child into the world is a life-threatening ordeal for both you and the baby. Many women do not survive it. Many more lose children in their first few years. The emotional toll of this constant proximity to death is a heavy, silent burden you are expected to bear. You are the heart of the home, the source of all comfort and continuity, but your worth is measured in your labor and your ability to produce sons. You are respected for your endurance, but you are rarely celebrated. The endless day of grinding, spinning, hauling, and worrying finally comes to a close. The sun has long since vanished, and the world outside, your wattle and daub walls, is a black, formless void, home to unseen things, both natural and not. Inside, the fire has built up its crackling flames, pushing the oppressive smoky darkness back just enough to create a small island of warmth and light. The final meager meal of oatcakes and thin broth has been consumed. The children are huddled together, sleepy but quiet. The familiar sounds of the livestock settling at the far end of the longhouse provide a rustling, shuffling background score. In these moments, your body aches with a fatigue so deep it feels like it has settled into your bones. The daily anxieties about raid sickness and hunger don't disappear, but they recede slightly, their sharp edges softened by the flickering firelight. And on a night like this, if you are truly fortunate, you get to experience a rare and precious gift, a story. There is a visitor in the settlement. He is not a warrior or a lord. He is a bard, a professional poet, and in your society, he is a figure of immense prestige and power. He travels from lordship to lordship, from one hall to another, and sometimes even to humble settlements like yours. He is a walking library, a living newspaper, and your only real source of entertainment. A mainstream historical fact of your culture is that the bardic tradition is an incredibly formal and hierarchical institution. There are different grades of poets, from the master poet, who composes epic praise poems for kings, down to the more common storyteller, the cypherwit. They undergo years of rigorous training, memorizing not just hundreds of ancient tales and genealogies, but also the incredibly complex rules of Welsh poetic composition, a system of intricate internal rhyme, alliteration, and stress patterns known as gwynedd. Tonight, the bard sits near the fire, the position of honor. He cradles a small harp, a tell in its frame carved from willow wood. After a few moments of quiet tuning, he begins. His voice is not the conversational tone of a modern storyteller. It is a resonant, rhythmic chant, a mesmerizing cadence that seems to rise and fall with the dancing flames. The harp provides a sparse, hypnotic counterpoint to his words. You and your family sit completely still, your faces illuminated by the fire, your eyes wide. For this short time, you are all transported. He sings of heroes. He tells the tale of Culhwch and his quest to win the hand of the giant's daughter Alwyn and the impossible tasks he must complete. He recounts the battles of legendary warriors from the old Northmen who fought and died long ago, but whose courage still echoes through the ages. He recites the genealogy of your own lord, tracing his lineage back through generations of mighty chieftains, each name a link in a great unbroken chain of honor. This praise is not mere flattery. It is a vital political act affirming the Lord's legitimacy and right to rule. It reminds everyone of the cosmic order of things, but it's not all heroics and praise. The bard's repertoire is wide, and this is where we find a quirky and frankly dangerous tidbit of his craft. A bard's greatest weapon is not his harp, but his tongue, which can be used for praise, maul, or for its devastating opposite satire, dishan. If a lord was ungenerous, cruel, or broke an oath, a master bard could compose a satire so biting, so humiliating, that it could destroy the man's reputation completely. The poem would mock his appearance, accuse him of cowardice and impotence, and ensure he became a laughingstock throughout the land. It was a form of character assassination by rhyming couplet. A powerful lord feared a bard's satire almost as much as he feared a rival's army. And this fear is what guaranteed poets good hospitality wherever they went. It's a bit like knowing your dinner guest might leave you a scathing Yelp review that could get you exiled. You lean forward captivated. Historians and literary scholars still argue about how much the common person, uneducated in the finer points of gwynedd, would have understood of the high formal poetry recited in the courts? Was the complex wordplay and archaic language fully appreciated, or was it the story's general gist, the drama and the emotion that held the audience? For you, listening to this traveling poet, it is likely the latter. You might not catch every clever metaphor, but you feel the power. You feel the sorrow in the lament for a fallen hero, the thrill of the hunt, the magic of the other world. The fire pops, sending a shower of sparks into the smoky gloom. The bard's voice drops to a near whisper as he tells a local ghost story, and you feel a delicious shiver of fear run down your spine. For this brief interlude, you are not just a tired, hungry farmer in a damp hut. You are a part of a larger story, a shared history that stretches back into the mists of time. These poems and tales are your culture, your identity. They explain your world, they reinforce your values, and they provide a desperately needed escape from the brutal monotony of your life. It is the only art you will ever experience, the only time you will be truly transported by the power of words. The last notes of the harp fade into the crackle of the fire. The bard falls silent. The spell is broken. You are back in your smoky home, the familiar ache returning to your shoulders. But something inside you has been nourished. You have been reminded that there is more to life than survival, even if you only get to glimpse it for an hour or two on a cold, dark night. The bard's story fades, leaving a lingering echo of heroism and magic in the smoky air of your longhouse. That tale connects you to the soul of your people, to the deep mythical past of the Welsh. But there is another story, another power in your life that connects you to a much larger world, a world that stretches from your damp valley all the way to Rome. This is the story of the cross, the power of the Christian Church, an institution that promises eternal salvation while making very real, very heavy demands on your mortal life. Its grip is as inescapable as your Lord's, its presence marked by the most permanent building, the local church. Your church? Your lawn is likely the only other stone structure in the vicinity, apart from a Norman castle, if one has been built nearby. It is small, solid, and simple. Its walls are thick, its windows are narrow slits, and its roof is made of stone, slate, not thatch. It feels ancient, cool, and silent, a stark contrast to your noisy living longhouse. Inside, it smells of cold stone, beeswax, and incense, a sacred smell completely alien to your daily life. A roughly carved stone cross stands outside, and the building is surrounded by the minwent, the graveyard, where generations of your ancestors lie buried. This building is the stone bookend to your existence. You are brought here as an infant to be baptized, removing the stain of original sin. You will be married here before the church door. And your journey will end here, your body laid to rest in the consecrated ground, awaiting the final judgment. The man who presides over this domain is the priest. He is likely a local Welsh-speaking man, but he is also part of a vast international hierarchy that communicates in Latin. He is both one of you and separate from you. He is the gatekeeper to your salvation. You stand through the Mass on Sundays and feast days listening to him chant the mysterious Latin words you do not understand. You watch him perform the miracle of turning bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. You might confess your sins to him, though likely only infrequently whispering your transgressions in the cold of the church. You listen to his sermons, which are often fiery warnings about the torments of hell, or often a place of eternal fire and suffering that feels terrifyingly real. The church offers the ultimate hope that your brutal, short, and painful life is merely a prelude to an eternity of bliss in heaven or neph. But this hope comes at a price, a very steep one. A mainstream historical fact of your life is the tithe. You are legally and morally obligated to give a tenth of everything you produce to the church. 1/10 of your grain, 1/10 of your cheese, every 10th calf and lamb and piglet. This is not a voluntary offering. It is a tax collected by the priest or the bishop's reeve with the same diligence as your Lord's tribute. When you live perpetually on the edge of starvation, this tenth is a crushing burden. You spend all year carefully tending your animals only to have to hand over the 10th born, often one of the healthiest, to the priest. You start to suspect the holiest animals are also the tastiest. Your faith is a rich, complicated tapestry woven from the official doctrines of the church and the much older folk beliefs that still cling to the landscape. You pray to God Jesus and the Virgin Mary, but you also take care to avoid angering the Tylwyth Teg. You might attend Mass in the morning and leave a bowl of milk out for the household sprites at night. The local saint your church is named after might have attributes that are suspiciously similar to an older Celtic deity, and the holy well, where you pray for healing, was likely considered sacred long before the first Christian missionaries arrived. This blending of official and folk religion gives rise to some strange customs, including the quirky and macabre tidbit of the sin eater. This was a folk practice existing on the fringes of society and condemned by the church. When someone died, their sins were thought to hover around the body, preventing the soul from finding rest. A poor, shunned individual would be called to the house of the deceased. A loaf of bread and a bowl of ale were passed over the corpse and then given to the sin eater. By consuming this meal, he was believed to be consuming the sins of the dead person, taking their damnation upon himself. It was a terrifying spiritual transaction, a service that offered immense comfort to the bereaved family, but doomed the sin eater who became a pariah, forever burdened by the sins of others. It's a heck of a career choice. The job security is great, but the eternal damnation part of the benefits package is a significant drawback. So you exist in this dual spiritual state. You fear the priest's sermons about hellfire, but you also fear the fairy mound. You receive the sacraments, but you also use protective charms made of rowan wood. Historians and theologians still debate the depth of true Christian understanding among the rural population during this time. Did you comprehend the complex theology of the Trinity and the Atonement, or was your faith a more practical affair? A series of rituals to be observed, saints to be venerated, and tithes to be paid in order to ensure a good harvest, healthy children, and a shot at getting into heaven. For you, faith is less about theology and more about getting by. It is a source of profound comfort, a promise of ultimate justice and reward. But the institution that delivers it is also another powerful master, another mouth to feed from your meager stores, its grip on your life as firm and as heavy as the cold stone of the church walls. The tithes you pay to the church and the tribute you owe your Lord are heavy burdens, but at least they are predictable. You know the price. But living under the shadow of the marcher lords has introduced a new kind of debt, one paid in humiliation and loss of hope. The daily injustices, the arrogant commands of foreign reeves, the sight of their stone castles scarring your ancestral lands, It all builds up a slow, simmering resentment that passes from neighbor to neighbor in hushed, angry whispers. For years, this anger has been a fire with nowhere to burn. But then something changes. A leader emerges. Perhaps he is a powerful lord from the unconquered heartlands of Gwynedd, a man like Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, who forces the other Welsh rulers to acknowledge him as the one true Prince of Wales, a mainstream historical fact that represents a brief, glorious moment of unity. Or perhaps generations later, he is a descendant of the old princes, a man like Owain Glyndwr, who captures the imagination of the entire nation. The news spreads like wildfire carried by traveling bards and hurried messengers. There is a new hope, a chance not just to raid a rival's cattle, but to drive the Saeson the English out of Wales forever. The call to arms comes again, but this time it feels different. It's not a summons from your local lord to settle a petty squabble. It's a national awakening. The recruitment process is significantly more persuasive than before. It's less of a feudal obligation and more of a join us or be branded a traitor to the cause kind of offer. You don't really have a choice. You sharpen your spear, you say your goodbyes, and you join the growing host. This army feels different from the small war bands you've served in before. For the first time, you are standing alongside men from Deheubarth in the south and Powys in the east. You march under a banner you recognize from the bard's tales, perhaps the Red Dragon itself. There is a giddy, infectious energy in the air, a sense of unity and purpose you have never experienced. And it is all fueled by prophecy. This is the quirky and essential tidbit that turns a rebellion into a holy war. The bards are not just singing tales of old heroes now. They are reciting the prophecies of Merlin the Brood, which foretold that a chosen one, a Mab Darrigan, or son of destiny, would rise up to lead the Welsh to a final victory and reclaim the entire island of Britain. The leader of the rebellion is hailed as this prophesied savior. Every small victory is seen as proof that the prophecy is coming true. It's incredibly powerful propaganda, convincing thousands of ordinary men like you to risk everything on the word of a long-dead wizard. The first months of the rebellion are glorious. You are part of a great wave sweeping across the land. Marcher castles that have stood for generations are captured and burned. Colonist boroughs are sacked. You feel an exhilarating sense of payback for a lifetime of indignities. You fight with a ferocity you didn't know you possessed because you are no longer fighting for your lord's honor. You are fighting for your own, for your children's future, for Wales itself. Your guerrilla tactics once used for local skirmishes are now deployed on a grand scale, confounding the larger, more ponderous English armies. But the good times don't last. The English crown, slow to react at first, finally unleashes its full, terrifying might. King Edward the Fern, in his conquest of Wales, doesn't just send an army. He brings the entire English state to bear a relentless machine of men, money, and siege equipment. The sheer resources of the English are overwhelming. They build new, even more formidable castles, great concentric fortresses like Caernarfon and Harlech, designed to be impregnable and supplied by sea. They methodically cut down the forests that have always been your refuge. Their supply chain is organized and endless. Yours is basically whatever you can forage or capture. You begin to experience the bitter, grinding reality of a losing war. The heady optimism curdles into desperation. The great host of Welsh warriors begins to fracture, melting back into the hills as the English advance becomes inexorable. You are constantly hungry, always on the move, hunted and harried. The prophecies that once seemed so certain now sound hollow. Apparently, prophecies have a terms and conditions section that nobody bothered to read. The great leader, the son of destiny, is eventually killed or disappears, his head put on a spike and displayed at the Tower of London. The rebellion collapses. Historians still debate the fundamental nature of these great uprisings. Were they truly the expression of a unified national consciousness, a precursor to modern nationalism? Or were they the last desperate gasps of a dying aristocratic order driven by the personal ambitions of princes with the common people, swept along by a mix of loyalty, coercion, and immediate discontent? Looking around at the gaunt, grim faces of your fellow survivors, the distinction feels blurry and cruel. The aftermath is worse than the oppression that came before it. You straggle home to a land ravaged by war. The English response is not just military, it is legal and punitive. New, brutally repressive laws are put in place. The Welsh are forbidden from carrying arms, from holding public office, from living inside the fortified boroughs. Your defeat is made total and humiliating. The hope that burns so brightly is extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard despair. You are back where you started, but poorer, more oppressed, and haunted by the ghosts of the thousands who died for a dream. The silence on the hills is heavier now, filled with the memory of what was and what might have been. The dust from the last failed rebellion has settled not in a fine, heroic layer, but as a gray, muddy paste churned into the soil by the boots of English soldiers. The great dream of a free Wales, the one sung by the bards and fueled by prophecy, is over. The silence that follows is not peaceful. It is the hollow silence of defeat. You survived the war, but now you must survive the peace, and in many ways it is just as brutal. The age of the Welsh princes of the proud independent lordships is fading not in a final glorious sunset, but like a sputtering torch in a long, slow, soaking rain. You are witnessing the slow death of your world. The most visible change comes in the form of administration. The English are not just content with military victory. They want order, control, and above all, profit. The old Welsh system of contrefi and commotes, the ancient land divisions that have structured your society for centuries, are swept away. In their place, a mainstream historical fact is imposed upon you: the Statute of Rhuddlan. Your land is carved up into New English-style counties or shires: Flintshire, Caernarfonshire, Merionethshire. New officials arrive: sheriffs, coroners, bailiffs. They are mostly Englishmen who speak no Welsh, and they bring with them a new law, English common law, which steadily supplants the ancient traditions of Hywelda. The old system of compensation, the galanas and the sarhad, is replaced by a sterner, more impersonal justice system focused on crime and punishment. There is a new harshness, a new rigidity to life. Your world is being tidied up, reorganized, and filed away by a foreign power. You see this new order everywhere. Stone bridges are built over rivers, where you once used a rickety wooden one or a shallow ford. New roads are cleared, designed not for your convenience, but to allow English troops to move quickly between their great castles. The market in the local borough, once a place you avoided, is now essential. The old ways of barter and tribute are slowly giving way to a cash economy. You find yourself needing to handle coins, these strange cold silver things, stamped with the face of a distant English king, to pay your new rents and fines. It feels as if the very texture of life is changing, becoming harder, colder, more commercial. In this changing world, a new class of your countrymen begins to emerge. This is the quirky, and for many, the most painful tidbit of this new era. They are the Ushelweir, the high men, the old Welsh aristocracy who have looked at the smoking ruins of the rebellions and made a pragmatic choice. They have decided to collaborate. They learn to speak English. They adopt English fashions, and they find roles within the new administration. They become the sheriffs, the tax collectors, the local justices of the peace. They act as the middlemen between the English crown and the Welsh people. To some, they are traitors' men who have sold their heritage for a seat at the conqueror's table. To others, they are savvy survivors, preserving what little power and influence they can for the Welsh in a system designed to exclude them. It's a bit like the quiet kid in class suddenly becoming the hall monitor. You're not sure if you should resent him or be glad that at least it's not a complete stranger telling you off for running. This new reality creates a deep and painful rift in your society. The bonds of Cymdeithas, which held you all together, begin to fray. Loyalty is no longer simple. You still feel the old pull towards your kin and your community, but now you must also navigate the demands of this new power structure, often represented by a man who looks and sounds like you, but whose interests are now aligned with the English crown. And so, you watch the old ways fade. The professional bards who once sang praise to defiant princes now find themselves without patrons. Many are forced to wander, becoming little more than beggars, their complex poetry a dying art form. The great Welsh longbow, once the terror of the English, is now ironically co-opted. English kings actively recruit Welsh archers for their armies in France, turning a symbol of Welsh resistance into a tool of English ambition. Historians still engage in a fierce debate over the ultimate fate of Welsh culture after the conquest. Did the imposition of English rule mark its slow death, a gradual assimilation that would eventually erode the language, the laws, and the identity of the people? Or did the culture simply go underground, surviving in the privacy of the home in the words of the Welsh language, passed from mother to child in the poetry and songs that were now shared quietly by the hearthside rather than proclaimed in the great halls? For you standing in the fading light of this age, it feels like a death. The world feels smaller, more constrained. The magic seems to be retreating further into the mists. The old certainties are gone, replaced by a new, uncertain future under foreign rule. You still have your family, your smoky home, the familiar landscape of hills and valleys. But the spirit that animated it all, the fierce, proud, chaotic spirit of medieval Wales, is slowly, inexorably being tamed. You are no longer just a Welshman. You are becoming a subject, and that is the most brutal change of all. And so your long journey through that rugged and unforgiving past comes to a gentle close. The echoes of the bard's harp and the clash of spears begin to fade, replaced by the soft, familiar sounds of your own time in your own safe space. The weight of that constant grinding survival, the chill of the damp air, the gnawing hunger, you can let it all drift away now, like mist clearing from a silent valley. The world you have just visited was one of incredible hardship, a place where life was a fragile gift, easily broken by sickness, violence, or the simple turning of the seasons. But it was also a world of profound connection, of fierce loyalty, of stories that soared, and of a spirit that refused to be extinguished. Feel the comfort of your own bed, the gentle weight of your blanket, a luxury those souls in the smoky longhouse could never have imagined. Let the rhythm of your own breathing slow, pulling you away from that distant shore of history and back into the quiet harbor of the here and now. There are no raids to fear, no tithes to pay, no need to listen for the sound of approaching danger. There is only the stillness of your room, the quiet hum of the world outside your window, and the gentle pull of sleep. The struggles of that ancient time are over. Your struggles for today are done. It is time to rest, to let the last remnants of those old memories dissolve into the peaceful, formless, and welcoming landscape of your dreams. Let go now and drift. Sweet dreams.